The Broad Street Review podcast is teaming up with the Greater Philadelphia Cultural Alliance's RestART initiative, bringing you conversations about how Philly arts organizations are surviving the COVID-19 crisis and the changes they're taking into the future. I'm your host, Darnell Radford. Broad Street Review is Philly's home for arts, culture, and conversation. We're a nonprofit online arts and culture journal serving the greater Philadelphia area since 2005. Today on the podcast, as part of our 8-part summer series collaboration with Greater Philadelphia Cultural Alliance's RestART initiative, we touch base with Al-Bustan Seeds of Culture to understand how the organization has fared during the pandemic. Here is our interview with Mohannad Ghawanmeh, Executive Director of Al-Bustan Seeds of Culture. Welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Darnell Radford, and today I'm in the virtual studio with Mohannad Ghawanmeh. Did I say that correctly?
Very well done.
Just wanted to make sure. And Mohannad is the Executive Director of Al-Bustan Seeds of Culture. Mohannad, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
And being that this is your first time on the podcast, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. My name is Mohannad Ghawanmeh. I am an Arab-American immigrant to the United States. I have lived in the United States for about a quarter of a century. I went to university. First, I arrived to go to university in 1990. Went to university in Minnesota, of all places, and ended up living there for a while. Got a master's degree, went on to Los Angeles, and got a PhD in cinema and media studies. So this was sort of my academic route. My occupational route was mostly in the world of academia. As in, once I got my master's degree, I joined a college as an instructor and taught for about a decade, from the early 2000s to the early 2010s. And during that time, that was when I became a sort of a community organization worker, if you will, and an arts worker, especially relating to cinema. So I co-founded the Twin Cities Arab Film Festival in 2002 and went on to direct or curate a couple of other film festivals. And then I worked for a year as a script reader, development person for a film production company, greenlighting and red lighting, as it were, scripts, and acted a little and produced a film. And so sort of worked around cinema for quite a while. And then upon graduating with my PhD in 2020, within a couple of months, I was brought on as the successor to the founder and first executive director of Al-Bustan Seeds of Culture.
So tell us about the organization, Al-Bustan Seeds of Culture.
Curiously, Al-Bustan Seeds of Culture was founded around the same time as the Twin Cities Arab Film Festival that I just mentioned in response to your previous question. And that was both engagements, because Al-Bustan started as a summer camp for youth. And as such, both of these engagements came about partly in response to the deluge of negativity relating to Arab Americans and Arab people and Muslim people in the aftermath of the September 11th attacks.
Mm.
And we weren't, Al-Bustan and this film festival that I mentioned were not the only instances of this. There was, I think, a kind of an awakening maybe on the part of socially engaged Arab Americans throughout the country to demonstrate to other Americans that they'd been here for a while and that they contributed already and that they were still contributing. And the result of this sort of renewed consciousness, if you will, was the establishment of a number of organizations and initiatives around the country. Al-Bustan Seeds of Culture was then incorporated in 2003 as a non-profit 501c3. And one could say that it began centered on youth education, and then added to this work arts presentations, performances, events, especially musical performance, which I think became the organization's métier in the early 2010s. And with the passage of the years, Al-Bustan took on larger and larger art projects as it solidified its status and gained the trust of increasing number of funders. And then, especially after the coming in of the Trump administration, uh, one can certainly note an augmentation to the work that Al-Bustan was already doing in moving into civic engagement type work relating to, well, immigrant rights and the census, and that came up recently, and voting, education, registration, and most recently, COVID-19 awareness and vaccination. We are an arts organization, certainly, and we like to fulfill our mission to the extent possible by reaching as many people as principally in the Philadelphia area, and secondarily, I would say, in Pennsylvania, thirdly, in the United States at large, and then globally, especially with the increasing number of art events, presentations, engagements of all sorts that are going online and as such are accessible regardless of geography. And we've weathered the storm, I think, of COVID-19. I mean, I suppose we can expect another wave of infections coming, en masse coming in the autumn. But I would say that, especially here in the United States, I think we're sort of rather, most of it have an idea of what we're dealing with. And I think many of us, it's been proven with vaccinations, are resistant and not as susceptible. And that, of course, alleviates a lot of the tension, the anxiety that I'm sure you're aware, kind of threw a pall over all kinds of collective events and activities, including daily schooling and daily work environments.
Yeah. Um, I want to go back to March of 2020. I am primarily on the theater side of arts and culture, and we looked at this time as an intermission, which as the news progressed, the intermission became longer and longer. And what was going on in your organization in March of 2020, and how did that news change the path that your organization was on?
That's such an adroit question. I can address it faithfully, I can assure you, but perhaps not as completely as I would have liked to, because I wasn't with Al-Bustan in March of 2020.
Oh, that's
I,
okay. That's okay.
it's okay, it's okay. I do know about what happened secondhand. I've read it
Hmm.
in the various documents that came out of the organization at the time, and I think I can speak to it to some extent. I do know, for example, that the biggest event for Al Bustan in 2019 was moving for the first time into its own designated quarters. And that's where we are located now, 3645 Lancaster Avenue, near the intersection of Lancaster and Powelton. And, I think it was perhaps in September that officially the location was taken up. And by the time it was the organization has settled in. I think it was December, and so it was only about 3 or 4 months of sort of in-person activities before an assessment of an unprecedented assessment of how to go about making use of a space had to be undertaken.
Hmm.
And I think Al Bustan, did what all sorts of other organizations do, which is try and leverage what they can and reduce the risk to the extent possible of such an uncertain event, and one that lingered, and it's sort of like a bit like a refugees experience. You think you're going to be gone for 3 months, and then the 3 months is 3 years, and you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Um, but we were fortunate enough that we were not centered on our mission. Our work is not centered um, on in-person activity necessarily. And since the in-person activities such as education had gone online, we had to find a way to go online as well. And
Mm.
so we switched from to remote classes. They did not work as well. One could say certainly some forms work better than others. I would say that visual arts perhaps works better on Zoom than percussion. Singing
Mm.
really does suffer on Zoom.
Yeah.
The audio is just no, it's not that good, you know. Um, but we did our best, and I think the students did their best, and I would say that there was perhaps a reduction in the richness of the engagements once they went online, especially in the beginning when people were it's still jarring for people and they didn't exactly know how to go about it. And I would say that there have been some augmentations to the software and such since. But we, you mentioned an intermission. I mean, certainly, if we didn't take time off exactly, but we did have to take time to consider how we could most astutely maneuver and we didn't have to do the thinking by ourselves because we were keeping up with what other organizations were doing or was in the news.
Hmm.
And obviously everybody was talking about this hybridity business, about a hybridity of delivery, as it were. Although not everybody agreed what hybridity meant precisely, and I don't think that there's entirely agreement at this point. But I suppose optimally, one would deliver in person and remotely at once. We can do that now for about we have been able to for about I think 3 months for engagements that take place in the hub. We hope by next year that we can have in-person engagements that we can also stream live, um, and we look forward to kind of a sort of a greater reach because of that hybridity. I think it's exciting in that we hope that someday we will overcome and emerge from the pandemic, but the sort of the heightened tech capacity that we had to many of us many organizations were compelled to, even if were compelled to and then perhaps became encouraged to take on, will benefit all of us. One hopes. I mean, and I see this coming because we had people, for example, tune in to watch films we've screened from places we never thought would have interacted with Al-Bustan. Colombia, New Zealand, Italy. And we think that if somebody takes the time to engage with an organization that far away, there's probably good reason for it. So we look forward to continuing and growing our reach, and we hope that the adage that whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger is in effect in this case.
Yes. One of the questions I was going to ask is, who are you serving now, and has that evolved over the pandemic? You were just talking about virtual learning and remote or online events allowed you to reach a broader audience. Was it a focus before you had to go remote to reach a broader audience, or was the focus more specific to the community around you and so on? Could you speak to that a little bit more?
Surely. I think that Al-Bustan's reputation had extended beyond U.S. borders well before I came on, especially with the commissioning and and sort of the hosting of artists, especially Arab artists who live abroad. Something that started, I think, a decade ago or so, maybe even longer than that. But what's been enabled, as mentioned, was this sort of, the there was an evident largesse last year that we witnessed. This sort of kind of a generosity that many of us witnessed in the sort of non-profit sector, the cultural industry, non-profit industry, if you will. That foundations were realizing the peril. There was many such organizations, cultural organizations, were facing, came in to help, and in many cases they wanted to help in a way that was sustainable and that could make the organizations stronger for when we emerge from COVID. And I think that it was obvious that interacting in ways that were not hazardous to our health, such as through screens, was a very kind of an appropriate way of leveraging existing technology towards a purpose that many of us wanted to serve, namely connecting with audiences and students and so on. And so I think that the idea of capitalizing on the moment to extend our reach emerged from the kind of the reality of the circumstances around us. Ambition sometimes is, it's not abstract. It's sort of born out of what you think could happen based on what is before you, or maybe is within reach. And so we realized that it wasn't only like people that I mentioned in New Zealand and Colombia and Scotland and so on that were benefiting from this, but for example, working adults who, according to surveys, and we try to survey people we engage regularly. According to surveys, our adult Arabic students, almost to a person, wanted the classes online, because in-person classes, which I suppose Al-Bustan in the past would have thought there wouldn't have been an alternative to. You come to our headquarters there on Lancaster Avenue, and we hold the class in person in a space that can hold 15 people or what have you. It actually can hold about 25 or 30. But but it was they who preferred the an on a remote and online based classroom, because for them I think it meant that if they, coming home from work, that you're done with work at 5, by the time you get home it's 5:30, or maybe a little later than that, then you're hungry, you want to have dinner. That takes about a good, even if you're hurrying it, it's going to be another 15 to 30 minutes. And then
Yeah.
what? You're supposed to leave your home, get in a car, drive for another half an hour, park it. You know, the sort of the impediment, for somebody who's kind of really, tired at the end of the day. It might be too much to ask. But joining a class on Zoom, all that takes is flipping your laptop and switching and, clicking a couple of buttons, and you're there, having saved an hour of your precious time and probably energy that you can otherwise, in this case, dedicate to the intensive and demanding intellectual exercise of taking a language course, for example. So, the beneficiaries of this sort of the capacity to engage with our constituencies online were not only people far away, but even people in Philadelphia suburbs and within Philadelphia itself, who didn't want to drive half an hour as it often takes to go from one part of Philadelphia to another.
Hmm. Yeah. I've had many conversations over the past couple of years, and there has been this push pull
Mm.
because we're so used to being in person, especially when it comes to the arts, that we have a preference to be in person when we can. But there's also a luxury there that we don't always realize. Like
Yes.
you just said, being able to you know, clock out of work at 5 if you have a 9 to 5, and then get to a physical space by 7 o'clock, maybe because we have a lot of events that start a little earlier, you know, or if you don't actually live in town,
Yes.
and you come into the city to work, but you do want to take advantage of these things. And if you have to physically be there, you'll likely opt out because of other things you have to do. And yeah. So I've definitely seen the benefits of this kind of remote capacity, allowing us to do things a little differently. But I think many people have a hard time making adjustments. There's like a struggle for change, even though we are at the same time hungry for it.
Yeah. Well, change demands effort and
Hmm.
investment of effort and time.
Yeah,
And, in our sort of, in our, in our capitalistic world, I mean, in our, we, w- in the United States, where you've got to be stay on top of things, to ensure that you work the system. I mean, if you put so much effort into sustaining yourself that asking for change means yet like finding the time and the mental energy that you really would you haven't accounted for. You have to sort of create that, and you have to find a way to make that investment. And I think as we perhaps settle or as we age, I mean, I'll speak for myself, you become kind of more resistant to such investments because you think that you have the that like somehow you have the right not to have to put such effort forward, considering all the effort, all the adjustments you've made, throughout the decades.
yeah.
um, but I will say that back to the people we serve, of course, in-person interaction, in-person engagement, including that of education and of the arts, is richer in person. In communication theory, they talk about communication richness, right? They're like, a fire alarm is the least rich, and kind of in-person, face-to-face communication being the richest. And I still think that holds true. There's all sorts of things that you can pick up on when you are in the presence, a physical presence of somebody that
Hmm.
elude you. it's including in a two-dimensional interactive space such as video conferencing that omits, for example, also things like olfactory elements, right? Three dimensionality, right? All sorts of stuff that maybe we don't think about actively. But I will say that COVID, to some extent, as far as people who want to serve others are concerned, such as cultural workers like myself, alerted us to those who perhaps had not been thought about enough in the past. Disabled people, people who are caring for dependents, such as young children or the elderly, who can't leave their homes to go and take advantage of, an arts event, even though they might love the arts, and may very much bemoan being kind of not having the ability to enjoy it. So um, it's nice to give people options, and it's nice to as a leader of an arts organization. I'm I won't say comforted, but reassured, and I would say relieved to know that we are maneuvering in a way to be able to exclude fewer and fewer people.
Hmm. Yeah. I also think in the beginning of all of this, um, you know, there has been a greater conversation in the community about accessibility, and um, there are a lot of things that we had to do in order to keep people safe that actually checked those boxes, those accessibility boxes as well. Um, you know, there are benefits to a video conference or streaming kind of structure that allow you to allow for captioning,
Mm-hmm.
um, allow for greater visibility and audibility,
Mm-hmm.
and so on. And those things are in there, even though we would prefer to be in person uh, with them. So I think once we kind of caught our stride, because I guess it's hard for it was hard for everyone. There was a lot of uncertainty about, like, I'm sorry, you told us to go home kind of immediately, and it didn't give us a real timeline for when we could return back to our spaces, and so, but we have to keep moving. We have to keep moving forward. We can't necessarily just sit still in this whole process. Um, Earlier on, you spoke about some of the support that you received through this, and can you talk a little bit more about how you were supported by community foundations, policies, etc. During this in your time here at the organization? As we are still dealing with all of this.
Of course. So let me start by with the people we serve, who I think have been patient and accommodating, and sort of very much have shouldered the burden in adjusting themselves to how they, as what you had mentioned earlier, making the investment to adjust their lifestyles, their ways of taking in information, their ways of being impressed and being moved and being educated. So I think that was, I mean, I guess I've taken it for granted that it was really uncommon for us to have to sort of educate people about how to use some of this technology. They
Mm.
went and did it themselves, right? I mean, we didn't really have any courses on how. I think we produced a pamphlet on how to use Zoom in the beginning, and that was it.
Hmm.
People took it upon themselves. And I will say that there was, I think, a strong spirit of collaboration among cultural organizations arts organizations specifically facing similar challenges. We realized that, for selfish reasons, if not for solid reasons of solidarity, that considering the unprecedentedness of such a pandemic, like there was no way any of us were going to be able to think of golden answers alone. It was too big for that, and so to make better decisions, we had to sort of connect and learn from each other and make a point of sort of creating fora where we would visit and relate and discuss. And I can for example, I would illustrate by mentioning the many workshops and sessions that I attended with other EDs, where we talked about sort of the things that you and I are talking about now. And then I'd also mentioned earlier the foundations and government entities. The PPP loan, it shouldn't be forgotten, really helped a lot of workers in our field kind of survive a period of great uncertainty, and so that they suffered, but didn't, they weren't broken. And Al-Bustan was a beneficiary of that loan in 2 successive years, and from many local foundations that stepped up, including I go on and name them. We identify them on our website, and we thank them, and we appreciate the work that the largesse, the initiatives that they took in order to sort of release monies from, for example, their endowments and such. And I think that in a way, the COVID pandemic, this largesse, especially took into account the organizations that catered to some of the most vulnerable communities within our city, such as immigrant communities and refugee communities and communities of color, and in turn took account of the organizations that serve them, Al-Bustan being one of them. And so, it was quite clear to me that the charge adopted by these funders to protect and to perhaps seize the moment to support financially organizations of color, if I may, organizations serving people of color was evident in 2021, especially, and to some extent 2020. I think that's probably. I think things are normalizing a bit now, and the kind of back to working harder to earn our grant money.
Do you feel as an organization, do you feel adequately supported at this point? Or, and if not, what additional support, could you use at this time?
We do feel we're in I would say, a good place fiduciarily, where we have an excellent staff. We are, I think, appreciated and dare I say, admired. We would love to be able to connect with an increasing number of Arab Americans, especially in the city of Philadelphia, and I would single out two groups that would be nice to sort of to gain more engagement from, if not in support, not necessarily financial, and that would be sort of the long established Arab American community in town. From what I understand from my colleagues residing in the western suburbs, for example, and the second community being that of recent refugees and immigrants who are getting to know us thanks to some of our more accessible engagements such as our park parties that are taking place near to where they live, such as in Northeast Philadelphia. But we can do a lot more there's there's certainly um, um, room to grow in that regard in um, gaining a greater interaction with the 20 to 40,000 Arab Americans that we, as we understand, reside in the city and its suburbs. Uh, it would be nice to have more volunteers. To be honest, we have a lot of events that can use with human sort of with greater labor capacity, and we are I'd like to think an overachieving team of five with an active board, but a board that's also highly productive and overachieving in of itself. And so it would be nice to, for those who would like to get to know us better and maybe sort of start a long-term relationship with us, it would be nice to gain some more volunteer work. Otherwise, we feel that we are, dare I say the word blessed.
Well, that's great to hear. You know, we don't necessarily want to hear that there's still a great struggle. We want to hear that we've, found some sort of, footing, and we're ready to, move forward. So that's great, and that's also very inspiring too. Um,
The struggle
so
is
it sounds like,
there. Sorry to interrupt you,
hmm,
but the struggle is certainly there.
yeah.
But I think okay for organizations representing people who've been underrepresented to think that to think affirmatively and positively about this moment in history and to look forward to a better future. I don't see anything
Hmm.
wrong with that. I hope. I'm sorry to have hijacked your moment. Forgive me.
Oh no, no, not at all. It's kind of, we live in this perpetual, this is a, this is progress, but it hasn't gone far enough, kind of mindset. There's always more that can be done, of course. Um, that doesn't mean we're necessarily sitting here, um, with no way forward at all.
Yes.
Is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So I think the need for support is always there. Um, and for any of our listeners, we're not saying that Al-Bustan does not need your support. We're not saying that at
No,
all.
no, no.
Yeah,
We could
we
certainly,
need.
yes, we could certainly use with more. I'm just well, it's great to be able in a city like Philadelphia that in which there seems to be a network of entities that care about the cultural life of the city and
Hmm.
the lives of a variety of communities in this city that have struggled and continue to struggle. It of course the city is challenged, as are Arab Americans in many ways, including with economically, and these are inflationary times. We hear about stagflation. Last time I encountered that word was in macroeconomics, I think, in the 90s. And then they were
Yes.
predicting we'd never see it again.
Hmm.
So and we're hearing intimations about an economic crash, and so struggles struggle of life continues, and we live in a country where one can be broken not having made a mistake at all, not having been thoroughgoing, having been cautious, having been thoughtful. An illness or being in the wrong place at the wrong time, or driving while black, or I don't
Yeah.
know, can
Hmm.
can really can can turn things around in ways that are irrevocable. And so Um, one has to be vigilant, but I think that what's the alternative to optimism? As far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Is there anything you need to hear from the leaders of this industry that you haven't heard thus far?
Yeah, I'd like to hear about some concerted ways to get some people of color to positions at or near the very top. You know, um, it still seems that the dispensers of the largesse that I'd mentioned, the magnanimity, are white run and white, historically white institutions, and the recipients, if you will, of the support are,
Mm-hmm.
are uh, people of color. And I long for the day when, perhaps the opposite takes place. you
Yeah.
know. So that's something I think that we can work towards. I think that an excuse such as, well, there aren't enough people of color. There's just not enough of a critical mass to sort of be able to enable for those very talented, I think any kind of argument along those lines is bankrupt at this point. It's time to we've witnessed the value of having power be personified by people who come from a variety of backgrounds. I believe that thoroughly. I think it's been exemplified and proven, and
Mm.
I think that I see it personally. Like, I can encounter it. The idea creativity doesn't come out of is not sort of innate. It doesn't just come out of innate conditions or an innate sort of life condition. The way that we problem solve and the way we think about the future, and with the ways we think about how we may connect and grow and mutually empower, very much are informed by our backgrounds and by our own struggles, and those are often inscribed by our histories and the ways we look and the and those things that describe our physical being, and that will continue to be the case. So let's start seeing um, more people of color in high-ranking decision-making positions. It's high time.
Yeah. That's the ongoing conversation that needs to be at the top of all leadership lists. Absolutely. Um, can you think of a tough choice that you've had to make um, during this time, and how you soldiered through it?
Yes. Well, yes, I think I would say um, a tough choice certainly for us was about had to do with camp, our youth camp last year, and our youth camp this year, and health concerns relating to COVID, and concerns about, well, if one kid gets it and others catch it, and all of them have to take take have to essentially take camp off.
Mm-hmm.
What do we do then? And should we hold it online instead? It was held online in 2020 for the first time, but we decided last year that we had to hold it in person. And we ended up having to have it in July and had to have it outdoors. And that was dodgy,
Mm-hmm.
not to mention sweaty.
Yeah.
But people are more resilient than I think they give themselves credit for,
Mm-hmm.
and I think we are, I think there's strength in us that we can tap into when we need to. And I saw it, in those kids and in our camp counselors and in our staff. And it ended up being probably one of the most invigorating kind of engagements that I've had. I'm really looking forward to camp again here in about 3 weeks. Um, and this time we have the privilege of an indoor space as well. So you know, it's I speak of privilege, and it's a privilege to work in the cultural industry. It's a privilege to work and earn a living in relation to a field such as the arts. The arts are imperative, I think, to humankind. But I'm under no illusions that it's as anywhere as important as shelter or food or one's health or one's family or one's education. So I think that it's a privilege to um, work for Al-Bustan and to work and live in the city of Philadelphia, and to be a part of one of perhaps no more than a dozen Arab cultural organizations in the United States, and perhaps one of the most vital handful of them here in Philadelphia. There's not an equivalent to us in Los Angeles. There's not quite an equivalent to us in Chicago. There's not quite an equivalent to us, not as robust as us in New York even, or in Boston. It's we hope that we can sort of alert the Arab American community especially, but our allied communities as well here in Philadelphia, that we're here and we're here to serve, and we've done this for a long time and we're good at it,
Hmm.
and we enjoy it, and we look forward to interacting with you.
That's great. One of the questions I was going to ask is what makes your organization relevant, and you just answered it. So that's great.
we we
That's great.
we
There.
we try, we survey, and we try to get the most for our dollar, and we try.
Mhm. What can our listeners do to support the efforts of Al-Bustan Seeds of Culture?
Of course, why don't you contact us if you'd like, and find out more about what we do in the areas of arts events, exhibitions, presentations is one, education is the second, and civic engagement is the third. There are ample opportunities to contribute to one or more community in Philadelphia and beyond through Al-Bustan. And we're eager to sort of expand our network of people who, like us, care about others and about enhancing their lives in ways relating to the arts, especially.
Great, great. Um, is there anything else you'd like to add as we wrap up here?
Yeah, I'd like to say that it's special. I feel more confident than ever being an Arab American. That Al-Bustan Seeds of Culture was born out of a hectic time, a time of uncertainty, and perhaps entailed a kind of a reflexive stance, or a stance of, of wanting to uh, demonstrate and prove to other Americans that we're not going to hurt them, that we contribute like others do, that we
Mhm.
serve like others do. But I think now in 2022, our stance is more assertive. We know that we are of value. We know that we've contributed. It's just a matter of sort of locating opportunities, being recognized, being counted, and seeing more of us and hearing more good stories about us and from us. And that's the domain, that's the sort of area in which Al-Bustan will continue to forge ahead, as you've mentioned.
Great. Mohannad Ghawanmeh, Executive Director of Al-Bustan Seeds of Culture. Thank you for taking the time to chat with me today. For our listeners, if you want to learn more about this great organization, we will have the link in the chat, but you can visit albustanseeds.org for more information about the organization. And you have a pretty robust YouTube channel as well that is definitely worth a subscribe.
Thank you for the plug-in.
So, Mohannad, I want to thank you for taking the time to chat with me today. And I've learned so much more about your organization and its resilience. And I think it's great that you are here and that you're reaching out into the community and optimistic about continuing the efforts of Al-Bustan. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you, Darnell. It's been a delight to talk to you, and my regards to your listeners, and perhaps we'll meet again.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thanks for listening to Restart with BSR, presented by the Greater Philadelphia Cultural Alliance and the Broad Street Review podcast. Want to get involved with Broad Street Review? Head on over to our website at www.broadstreetreview.com to read, subscribe to our weekly newsletters, learn about writing for BSR, or become a supporter. Our readers' donations keep us running. Join the BSR conversation on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at BroadST Review. Thanks for being part of our community.